Somewhere right now, sitting quietly inside a browser, waiting for someone to type a question into the search bar, there is a small piece of software wearing a disguise, pretending to be a trusted AI search tool, while every single keystroke you type gets silently captured and sent to a stranger before you ever see a single search result. This is not a hypothetical warning. This actually happened, discovered by Microsoft's own security researchers in June 2026, hiding in plain sight inside the official Chrome web store. And it may have quietly captured the search habits of a staggering number of ordinary users before anyone realized something was wrong. Today, we're breaking down exactly how this fake extension worked, why it slipped past Google's own review process undetected, and what this entire incident reveals about a much bigger, much scarier trend spreading across browser extension stores everywhere. Let's start with what this extension actually was. How convincingly it disguised itself. The malicious extension called itself Search for Perplexity AI, deliberately built to mimic the real, legitimate Perplexity AI, a generally popular AI-powered research assistant that answers questions directly instead of just showing you a list of links to click through. The real Perplexity AI lives at the website perplexity.ai, and its actual official Chrome extension is simply named Perplexity AI Search. The fake version copied similar branding, similar visual styling, and similar naming conventions, but routed its traffic through a lookalike domain called perplexityai.online, a subtly different address designed specifically to trick a casual glance while still feeling familiar enough not to raise obvious suspicion. This kind of trick has an official name in the cybersecurity world called typo squatting, where attackers register domain names deliberately designed to closely resemble a legitimate, trusted brand, hoping that busy, distracted users simply will not notice the tiny difference in spelling or domain structure. It is a remarkably old trick, dating back decades in the world of phishing and online fraud, but it remains stubbornly effective precisely because most people simply do not carefully inspect every single domain name they encounter throughout their day, especially when an extension's branding, icon, and overall presentation look convincingly polished and professional. Once a user actually installed this fake extension, here is exactly what happened behind the scenes. Microsoft's Defender security research team explained that the extension changed the browser's default search settings, quietly making itself the default search provider for that browser going forward. This meant that every single time a user typed anything into their address bar, whether that was a genuine web search or simply trying to navigate directly to a website, that entire query first got secretly routed through the attacker's own infrastructure, before eventually being passed along to legitimate search results. From the user's perspective, everything appeared completely normal. Search results still loaded, autocomplete suggestions still appeared, and nothing about the actual browsing experience looked broken or suspicious in any obvious way. But behind that seamless, ordinary-looking experience, every single keystroke, every search term, and every real-time autocomplete suggestion request was quietly being intercepted and logged first. This is honestly one of the most unsettling aspects of the entire incident. Microsoft's technical analysis of the logging code running on the attacker's own server indicated that this data collection was clearly intentional, deliberately designed and built into the extension from the very beginning, rather than being some kind of accidental bug or unintended side effect. This was not sloppy, careless code that happened to leak data by mistake. This was a carefully engineered surveillance tool, deliberately disguised as a helpful AI search companion, built specifically to quietly harvest exactly what millions of ordinary users were curious about, searching for, and interested in all day, every day. So how exactly did this extension technically manage to intercept and reroute all of that search traffic without immediately breaking the browsing experience or triggering obvious red flags? The answer comes down to two specific Chrome permissions, both of which are completely legitimate, officially supported features that Google itself provides to extension developers for entirely legitimate reasons. The first permission is called Chrome Settings Overrides, and it is the standard official mechanism that allows any Chrome extension to become the browser's default search engine. Plenty of completely legitimate extensions use this exact permission for entirely honest purposes, letting privacy-focused users switch their default search provider to something like DuckDuckGo, or letting companies build genuinely useful custom search tools for their own specific purposes. The second permission is where things get significantly more interesting and significantly more dangerous. It is called Declarative Net Request, often abbreviated simply as DNR, and it is a rules-based system that allows an extension to redirect networks, traffic, rewrite URLs, and selectively filter specific requests as they pass through the browser. Again, this permission exists for entirely legitimate reasons. Plenty of ad blockers, privacy tools, and content filtering extensions rely on exactly this kind of capability to function properly. But Microsoft's researchers specifically pointed out something important here. This particular permission simply was not necessary for an extension whose only advertised purpose was supposedly just providing AI-powered search results. An extension that only needs to answer search queries has no legitimate reason to also request broad, powerful permissions specifically designed for redirecting and rewriting network traffic across the entire browser. This combination of permissions, individually completely legitimate and officially supported by Google, but suspicious specifically when combined together for a tool that had no real reason to need both at once, represents exactly the kind of subtle warning sign that security researchers are trained to watch for. Unfortunately, according to Microsoft's own disclosure, neither of these permissions individually triggered any kind of automatic warning flag during Google's own official Chrome Web Store review process, meaning this fake malicious extension successfully passed through Google's official vetting system and became publicly available for anyone in the world to freely download and install. If you are finding this breakdown genuinely useful, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we regularly break down major security stories exactly like this one. Now, here's a detail that deserves special attention because it complicates the usual straightforward story we tell about malicious software. Microsoft's investigation specifically found no evidence that this particular extension actually stole passwords, login credentials, or other directly sensitive account information. On the surface, that might sound like some reassuring, silver lining kind of news, but security researchers were quick to emphasize an important, uncomfortable caveat right alongside that finding: the permissions this extension had already requested and already been granted would have easily allowed the attacker to expand the scope of data collection significantly further at any time they chose, simply by updating the extension's code remotely without needing to ask users for any additional permissions or raise any new red flags whatsoever. This detail matters enormously, and it points towards something genuinely important to understand about how modern browser extensions actually work. When you install an extension from an official store, you are not just trusting the exact code that exists at the precise moment you click install. In most cases, you are granting ongoing ambient trust to whatever that extension's developer decides to push out as updates in the future, often without any further review, confirmation, or even notification directly to you as the end user. An extension that starts out simply logging your search queries could, in principle, be quietly updated tomorrow to start capturing far more sensitive information, precisely because the underlying permissions required to do so were already granted the very first day you installed it. Let's talk about scale for a moment, because this is exactly the detail that makes this particular story so alarming. Google Chrome remains, by a wide margin, the most popular web browser on the entire planet, used by roughly 2/3 of all internet users worldwide, which translates into billions of people relying on it every single day for everything from casual browsing to sensitive financial transactions. The Chrome Web Store itself hosts well over 100,000 different extensions, ranging from simple utility tools all the way up to sophisticated productivity applications used by millions of people daily. When a malicious extension successfully slips through Google's official review process and becomes publicly available for download, it is not distributed through some obscure, sketchy corner of the internet that only careless users might stumble into. It is sitting right there inside the same official, trusted store that Google itself explicitly recommends to hundreds of millions of everyday users as the safe, verified place to find legitimate browser extensions. And unfortunately, this specific incident was far from an isolated, one-off event happening in a vacuum. According to reporting covering this exact story, earlier in 2026, researchers discovered that a completely separate wave of fake Chrome extensions had already compromised over 900,000 users by specifically stealing their private conversations with popular AI chatbots like ChatGPT and DeepSeek. In yet another entirely separate incident from earlier this year, security researchers identified a network of 108 different Chrome extensions, all disguised as innocent-looking helper tools, that collectively compromised roughly 20,000 unsuspecting victims before finally being discovered and removed. And stepping outside the world of browser extensions entirely, researchers over at McAfee separately reported earlier in the year that 50 malicious Android apps, before finally being caught and removed, had already accumulated more than 2.3 million downloads combined on the official Google Play Store. Taken together, these separate incidents paint an unmistakably consistent, troubling picture. Official app stores and extension marketplaces, despite genuinely significant investment from companies like Google in automated scanning, human review processes, and increasingly sophisticated detection systems, continue to serve as remarkably effective distribution channels for cleverly disguised malicious software, precisely because users have understandably learned to trust these official platforms as inherently safe, verified spaces, an assumption that attackers have become increasingly skilled at deliberately exploiting. It is also worth understanding exactly why AI-branded tools specifically have become such an especially attractive disguise for attackers building malicious extensions throughout 2026. Artificial intelligence tools have exploded in popularity over an incredibly short span of time, with millions of curious, everyday users actively searching for and installing new AI-powered browser extensions, assistants, and productivity tools on a near constant basis. This creates a perfect storm of conditions for attackers to exploit. Users are actively primed and eager to try new AI tools, genuinely excited by rapid innovation happening across the entire industry, and often somewhat less cautious than they might otherwise be with a completely unfamiliar, unbranded piece of software, precisely because AI-branded tools currently carry an aura of cutting-edge legitimacy and exciting new capability. Attackers understand this dynamic extremely well and deliberately exploit exactly that combination of curiosity, trust, and reduced caution by wrapping their malicious code inside convincing, trendy AI branding that closely mimics genuinely popular, legitimate tools that people are already actively searching for. Now let's talk about what actually happened once Microsoft's security researchers discovered and disclosed this specific vulnerability publicly. After Microsoft's Defender Security Research team published their detailed technical findings on June 29, 2026, Google moved to remove the fake extension entirely from the Chrome Web Store. This is genuinely good news, and it represents exactly the kind of responsible disclosure and swift remediation process that the broader cybersecurity industry generally hopes for whenever a serious threat gets uncovered. However, this is the uncomfortable part that deserves real fake Perplexity extension before its removal remained just as exposed and vulnerable afterward, since Chrome does not automatically detect, disable, or remove previously installed extensions purely because that same extension later gets pulled from the public store. This is precisely why security researchers covering this story specifically urged affected users to take direct, active steps themselves, rather than simply assuming the problem was automatically solved the moment Google removed the listing. If you happen to have this specific extension installed, identifiable by its extension ID FLKGFOJKOGDING BDMCMKPB the recommended first step is removing it immediately and completely from your browser. Beyond that, security experts specifically recommended rotating your important account passwords as a precautionary measure, even though Microsoft's own investigation found no direct evidence that this particular extension had been stealing login credentials. This recommendation reflects that same uncomfortable point we raised earlier. An extension holding this particular combination of powerful permissions could theoretically have been updated at any point to expand its data collection scope significantly further, and taking a simple precautionary step like rotating your passwords costs very little effort compared to the potential downside of assuming everything was definitely fine the entire time. Beyond this one specific incident, there are several practical habits worth adopting that meaningfully reduce your risk of falling victim to similar fake extensions going forward. Before installing any browser extension, even in one that appears prominently inside an official store search result, take a few extra seconds to actually verify the exact website domain associated with that tool, comparing it carefully against the extension's claimed branding. In this specific case, the difference between the legitimate Perplexity.ai and the fake Perplexity.ai.online was small enough to easily miss at a quick glance, but obvious enough to catch immediately if you specifically pause to compare the two side by side. It is also worth developing the habit of actually reading through an extension's requested permissions before installing it, rather than simply clicking through the installation process on autopilot the way most of us typically do. If an extension advertising itself as a simple AI search assistant is requesting permissions related to redirecting network traffic, rewriting URLs, or modifying core browser settings well beyond what its advertised functionality would obviously require, that mismatch itself represents a meaningful warning sign worth pausing over, even if you are not a technical expert capable of fully understanding every single permission's precise technical implications. Beyond individual, extension by extension caution, this entire incident also highlights a bigger, more systemic challenge facing the entire browser extension ecosystem as a whole throughout 2026. As browser extensions continue growing more powerful, more deeply integrated into how millions of people search, shop, communicate, and work online every single day, the potential impact of a single successful malicious extension slipping through official review processes keeps growing correspondingly larger. A fake extension quietly logging search queries might sound relatively mild compared to some of the more dramatic cybersecurity stories that make headlines: ransomware attacks crippling entire hospital systems, or massive data breaches exposing millions of stolen passwords all at once. But the sheer quiet scale of search query logging, potentially affecting millions of ordinary users over an extended period of time, without any of them ever noticing anything unusual happening, represents its own genuinely serious privacy concern. Building detailed profiles of what people are curious about, worried about, researching, and interested in, all without their genuine, informed consent. If you are enjoying this deep dive into how these kinds of browser-based security threats actually work behind the scenes, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button. Because we cover breaking cybersecurity stories exactly like this one on a regular, ongoing basis. It is also worth digging a little deeper into exactly what kind of information gets exposed when something like your address bar search history quietly ends up in the hands of a stranger, because it is far more revealing than most people initially assume. Think honestly for a moment about everything you personally type into a browser's address bar over the course of an average week. It is not just casual searches. About recipes or weather forecasts. People frequently type deeply personal, sometimes surprisingly sensitive queries directly into that search bar. Questions about medical symptoms they are worried about, financial struggles they are quietly researching, relationship problems they are trying to work through, or professional situations at work they are privately trying to navigate. A detailed, continuously updated log of someone's search queries over time effectively builds an extraordinarily intimate psychological profile of that person, often far more revealing than a single isolated data breach involving something like a stolen password ever could be on its own. This is exactly why privacy-focused security researchers tend to treat search history logging with genuine seriousness, even in cases like this one where no direct financial credentials were confirmed to have been stolen. Passwords can be changed relatively quickly and easily the moment a breach becomes known. But a detailed historical record of what someone was curious about, it is also worth taking a moment to explain, in slightly more technical detail, exactly how the Omnibox, meaning Chrome's combined address bar and search bar, actually communicates with a search provider under normal circumstances, since understanding this makes it much clearer exactly where this particular attack managed to insert itself. Under completely normal circumstances, whenever you begin typing anything into that address bar, Chrome's browser actively listens to your keystrokes in real time and continuously sends partial versions of what you have typed so far directly to your chosen default search provider, which is exactly what allows those helpful real-time autocomplete suggestions to appear beneath the address bar as you type, guessing what you might be looking for before you have even finished typing your full query. This entire real-time suggestion system depends fundamentally on your browser trusting whatever search provider happens to currently be configured as your default. By quietly hijacking that default search provider setting through the legitimate Chrome settings, overrides permission, this fake extension essentially inserted itself directly into that exact same real-time communication pathway, meaning it received not just your finished, completed search queries, but potentially every single partial keystroke you typed along the way, before you had even finished formulating your complete thought. This level of granular, real-time capture is honestly even more invasive than simply logging completed searches after the fact, since it can potentially reveal not just what someone ultimately searched for, but also what they initially started typing, and then perhaps reconsidered or deleted before finishing. Let's also talk briefly about Perplexity AI itself, the legitimate company whose brand and reputation ended up being exploited without its knowledge or consent throughout this entire incident. Perplexity has rapidly grown into one of the most popular AI-powered research and search tools available throughout 2026, valued specifically for its ability to directly synthesize clear conversational answers backed by cited sources, rather than simply presenting users with the traditional familiar list of blue links that older search engines have relied on for decades. This growing popularity and rapidly expanding user base made Perplexity an especially attractive target for exactly this kind of brand impersonation attack, since attackers specifically benefit from piggybacking on genuine growing consumer trust and curiosity surrounding an already popular, rapidly expanding product. This dynamic actually highlights an uncomfortable, largely unavoidable side effect of building a genuinely successful, rapidly growing consumer technology brand. In 2026, the more popular and trusted a specific product or company name becomes among everyday users, the more consistently attractive that same brand becomes as a disguise for attackers looking to exploit exactly that hard-earned trust for their own entirely separate, malicious purposes. Perplexity itself did absolutely nothing wrong here, and bears no direct responsibility whatsoever for this fake extension's existence, but the incident nonetheless illustrates how quickly and effectively Attackers can weaponize even a completely unrelated, legitimate company's positive public reputation against the exact same everyday users that company has worked hard to earn the trust of in the first place. It is also worth mentioning that this specific pattern, attackers deliberately impersonating popular, trending AI tools specifically to distribute malware or conduct covert surveillance, extends well beyond just this one single Perplexity-related incident throughout 2026. Security researchers have documented numerous similar cases throughout the year involving fake extensions and applications impersonating other extremely popular AI tools and platforms, precisely because the underlying strategy works remarkably well across virtually the entire rapidly expanding AI product category. Whenever a new AI tool captures significant public attention and rapidly growing adoption, attackers seem to reliably follow close behind within a matter of weeks or months, building convincing imitations specifically designed to capture at least a meaningful percentage of that same tool's rapidly growing search interest and installation volume for their own separate purposes. This pattern creates a genuinely important practical lesson specifically for anyone actively seeking out new AI-powered tools throughout the current wave of rapid AI adoption happening across the entire technology industry. Whenever a specific AI tool becomes suddenly rapidly popular, generating significant buzz, media coverage, and word-of-mouth recommendation, that exact same sudden popularity simultaneously creates a strong financial incentive for attackers to quickly build convincing, similarly branded imitations, hoping to capture a meaningful share of that same surging search interest before official verification processes, security researchers, or affected companies themselves manage to catch on and respond. This suggests that genuinely new, rapidly trending AI tools specifically deserve an extra, deliberate degree of caution and careful verification precisely during that early period of explosive growth, when public awareness of what the tool's official website and extension actually looks like has not yet fully solidified across the broader population of curious, eager early adopters. There's also a broader industry-level conversation happening throughout 2026 about whether official app and extension stores need to fundamentally rethink their review processes specifically to address this exact kind of subtle, permission combination-based attack. Some cybersecurity experts have specifically argued that platforms like Google should implement additional automated checks that specifically flag unusual permission combinations relative to an extension's stated advertised purpose, essentially building automated systems that ask exactly the same skeptical question a careful human reviewer might ask: does this specific combination of requested permissions actually make logical sense, given what this particular tool claims to do? Others have argued that human review processes, while inherently more resource-intensive and harder to scale across a store containing well over 100,000 different extensions, remain genuinely necessary specifically for catching subtle context. Dependent red flags that purely automated systems consistently struggle to reliably identify on their own. Whatever specific technical solution eventually gains the most traction across the industry, this particular incident adds meaningful additional pressure and urgency to an already ongoing, increasingly important conversation about extension marketplace security more broadly. As browser extensions continue accumulating deeper, more powerful access to core browsing functionality, search behavior, and increasingly sensitive personal data, the stakes associated with any single successful malicious extension slipping through official review processes keep climbing correspondingly higher, precisely because a successful, well-disguised search hijacking or data logging attack can now realistically reach millions of genuinely unsuspecting users before ever being caught and removed. It is also worth stepping back and asking a bigger question about the fundamental challenge Google and other major platform providers face when trying to keep official extension stores genuinely safe at massive scale. With well over 100,000 extensions currently available in the Chrome Web Store, and countless new submissions arriving constantly from developers all around the world, Google simply cannot feasibly conduct an exhaustive, deeply thorough manual security review of every single line of code inside every single submitted extension. Instead, platforms like Google rely heavily on a combination of automated scanning tools, specific permission-based red flags, and periodic reviews, a system that generally works reasonably well for catching obviously malicious code patterns, but one that can still be successfully evaded by attackers who deliberately keep their malicious functionality subtle, combining individually legitimate permissions in ways that automated systems simply are not specifically trained to flag as suspicious. This creates an ongoing, escalating challenge that closely resembles a continuous game of cat and mouse, playing out simultaneously across every major software platform in existence.